how would somebody who works here, who's involved, knows if they're doing a good job or not? And one of the things that you'll see in there is this kind of list of I statements, and it was intended to be something that is a little different, but it begins to be a way for folks to be able to assess, all of us, me included, to assess the extent to which we're living out through our work the values that we hope that this plan communicates and really reflects our work going forward. And we exist here to serve Minnesota and the women and men who come into the system, and hopefully to facilitate or help or offer the opportunity for life transformation. Your input in this and your involvement as stakeholders throughout the continuum is really, I think, critically important. So I just want to say thank you. I'm really grateful that you're here and spending some time with us and willing to give us your input. Just know that what we hear here and that this plan is in development, it's something that the governor has really pushed all agencies on, and this has been an area of a big focus. You will see as the governor looks at his own goals for the state enterprise as a whole, some correctional goals will be included in that plan, but I think ultimately we really wanted to have a plan that kind of sets us on a path that meets with the expectations of the people that ultimately pay for the service and who are our partners and the men and women that we ultimately serve in corrections. So again, thank you for that. It's a big week for corrections that we have this and these listening sessions, which are important. And tomorrow, the OLA report will be released. Office of Legislative Auditor report on prison safety will be released, and that is going to be, I think, certainly been part of influencing the way we think about our strategic plan as well. So again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing your comments, and I hope you see that you get an opportunity to touch and shape the direction that this plan ultimately, how it lands. So thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, so let me just kind of walk us through what we came up with in terms of an agenda. We'll do quick introductions up here. We won't go around the room because it will take too long. But if you speak up, maybe just when you do here shortly, maybe your name and where you're from, or if you have a particular interest, just so we can kind of put faces and names and organizations together. So we'll briefly do some introductions. I'll walk you through a 10-minute high-level briefing on kind of what's in the strategic plan. You should have copies in front of you as well. And then we're going to be in listening mode, like I mentioned earlier, in terms of kind of receiving public testimony and comment. What are we missing in the plan? What's confusing? Are there parts that you think should be emphasized as more of a priority? And I'll walk through the timeline in a second. This is not a done deal yet, so you have an opportunity to really give us your best thinking and your critique based upon your experiences. And then we'll wrap up in that regard. If you're not comfortable, for whatever reason, speaking publicly, I did pass around a copy of the memo that went out last week. There is a general email box that we use for folks who wanted to send us comments, so feel free to use that as well. Or if you're listening today and you want to reflect on it and share some comments, if you can get it to us in the next 3 or 4 days, that would be ideal, because we've got some tight deadlines in terms of producing the next draft of the plan. All right, so does that sound like kind of a good strategy here for the next hour and a half? All right, we'll jump in. I'll talk for, again, 10 minutes max, and then we're going to turn it over to you all. But first, we'll do quick introductions, and we'll pass the microphone around.
Good afternoon, Marcus Schmidt. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Department of Corrections. Just very humbled and appreciative of all of you taking time out of your day to be here for this discussion. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michelle Smith, and I'm currently the Deputy Commissioner at the department. It's good to see some familiar faces and also those that we don't know, so hoping to hear a lot from you this afternoon. Thanks for being here.
Good afternoon, Curtis Shanklin, Deputy Commissioner, Community Services Division. I'll just echo what my colleagues have said. Just really appreciative for you all being here. And just know that the feedback that you give to us today is of the utmost importance. So we're not doing this just to check a box. This was actually something that we came with internally to be intentional about getting feedback from all of our partners to contribute to this plan. So please know that. Really appreciate you all being here. Please lend your voice because it can only make this draft that we have more enhanced and better prepared and put together. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Curtis. All right, I'll walk through this pretty quickly here. So why we're doing this, simply put, is to create positive, lasting change. And here's a quote that we like, which is, "You plan to get done what ordinarily will not get done." The type of planning we're talking about is designed to create an extraordinary result. So we want to be deliberate and intentional about making things better where they should be better and continuing to do things well that we are doing well today. So what do we mean by strategic planning? It's really at a 40,000-foot level. So as you look at it, you may see things that are very specific. Even though it might not be reflected ultimately in a strategic plan document, it will be part of the implementing plans and various different tasks. So what we're talking about is at a 40,000-foot level, assessing where we are today as an organization, where do we want to be in the future, and what does success look like? What does better look like? And then what are some of the key strategies, goals, objectives, ways of measuring progress kind of at a high level? That's what we mean by strategic planning. So the process and timeline, this is a kind of a year-long effort. We spent a significant amount of time internally meeting with a number of various different employees all across the state, in both the community services side, here in the central office, and as well in our facilities. So right now, we're right here in kind of early 22, which is to produce a draft and solicit feedback and input. But pretty quickly in the spring here, we've got to finalize it and put it up on our website and share it. And one of the things that we felt strongly about as a leadership team is that we engage not only internally with our own employees and inmates and people who are under supervision, but with community partners and stakeholder organizations and the general public to give you a chance to influence and shape. And then we start something relatively new for the Department of Corrections, which is a dashboard, if you will, to track progress towards some of the key goals. And this, as you see in a moment, some of this will be relatively new or brand new for parts of our organization. So we want to try to do a beta test this summer in terms of what does that look like and how accurate is the data that we're gathering, performance data, and how do we start to share that in a way internally and externally to help guide tweaks to the plan and hold ourselves accountable towards outcomes. And then obviously, like any good plan, the moment it's done, it starts to become obsolete, and there's going to have to be changes and modifications, things that we've tested that don't work that we need to stop doing, new things, new strategies. So that's kind of an ongoing process and a cycle over time. So a quick caveat, like I mentioned, we acknowledge that strategic planning to implementation is a paradigm shift for the agency as a whole. There might be certain units or certain facilities that have done components of it, but for an organization this size, it's new and it's different. So give us a little bit of space as we are trying new things here. I'm sure we're going to make some mistakes, but give us the feedback about what works and doesn't work. We want to be deliberate in assessing readiness for managing change, because change can be scary even though people may be asking for it. So we want to be very thoughtful about that. And then building the structures, systems, and leadership capabilities to successfully fulfill the DOC's mission and achieve the vision in a way that's consistent with some values. And I'm going to walk through mission, vision, values in a second. So readiness for change. This is one of the consulting groups here. They talk about it from unaware of where you are to where you want to have advocacy and ownership. And this is a large organization, so there's really no way to say collectively exactly where we are, but we're on this end over here in kind of this whole building readiness for change and what that looks like in the future. So key highlights in the draft plan. We want to talk a little bit about mission, what that is, some new language, vision, some strategy, and then some of the goals and objectives. So we developed a new mission statement. The previous one was like 25 words long. It was pretty cumbersome. We got a lot of feedback in our listening sessions internally and externally that it was so long that people didn't know what it meant. So we simplified it for the purposes of this strategic plan, and it's transform lives for a safer Minnesota. So once people come to the Department of Corrections, 95% of them or so get out of our facilities and go back into the community. What is our agency doing to help transform their lives so they make better choices when they reintegrate back into society? In terms of a vision, it describes what success looks like in the future, even if it's not possible today. Influenced very heavily from the commissioner and his kind of values and the work that he did with a number of you and across our agency. It's achieving justice through promotion of racial equity, restoration from harm, and community connectedness. And then values. We wanted to simplify it. And what are values? We define it as it helps us distinguish between what's right and wrong, determine what behaviors to reward. In essence, it's kind of a collective moral compass for the agency. Safety, equity, dignity, fairness, honesty, respect, and service were the values that we came up with for this draft. Strategic priorities. These are main areas creating positive impact on performance towards achieving vision. We came up with 2 priorities. One, inward looking, which is to improve organizational culture. And we define culture as basically how we treat one another, staff to staff, employees to people who are incarcerated or working with community stakeholders or people who are under community supervision. And then the second priority is deliver exceptional public services for the taxpayers of Minnesota. So we have 2 priorities, and then underneath these priorities, we have some key initiatives, which if you follow along in the plan, it might not be in this exact same order, but you can get a little sense of what we mean by that. One is engage community stakeholders and agency partners. So we're trying to practice what we're preaching today, bring in people from outside the organization who are impacted by our work in one way or another, and begin to engage them to give us advice, direction, help influence decision-making in ways that are most constructive and effective. Provide transformative programming for the people who are sent to our facilities or under supervision and probation. And then third, promote safety for victims. And then in terms of improving our organizational culture, we have a lot of work to do in this area in the Department of Corrections. So we wanted to, part of the philosophy is, from a leadership team, if we take better care of the people who work for the Department of Corrections, they in turn will do a better job of delivering services for the state of Minnesota. It's part of the theory. So we were very deliberate in articulating and used well over 60 internal listening sessions with a cross-section of employees all across the state to help inform these priorities and to begin to pull out some potential goals and strategies. So this was informed by heavy amounts of internal work over the past year. So improve safety for everybody, staff and inmates in the facilities, as well as in the community. Recruit and retain talented staff. Third, promote staff wellness. And you see this across law enforcement across the country where there's some pretty serious concerns around the impact of professionals who are working in public safety. And if they're not doing well, it's hard to deliver high quality services. So we want to be deliberate about meeting people where they are who work for us. Promote servant leadership, which is a philosophy that is championed by Governor Walz. And it really puts people who were leading at the center of the work and flips that paradigm upside down. There is some research out there that draws correlations between practicing servant leadership and safety. So drawing upon some of that most recent research. And then modernizing organizational processes and structures, so to the degree that some of our own internal business systems need to be, or technology need to be upgraded to kind of better meet today's modern workforce challenges. We have some specific goals there. So I'm going to wrap up. I won't go through all of this, but just kind of give you a little bit of a sense in a different format than what you've got in the plan. So what we have is just a kind of a master list of all these initiatives and goals. We define a goal as what the organization is striving to accomplish during implementation of the plan by December 31st, 2022. And we've got some draft goal statements. You can see them in the plan. And then we've got some specific objectives. And what we mean by an objective, just for the purposes of this effort, is a specific result the agency aims to achieve within a shorter, limited time and with available resources, and it's easier to measure whether or not you're making progress towards that objective. So goal might be a big idea, kind of an aspirational outcome that we're looking for in the next 3 years. An objective might be something that's a little bit shorter time frame, influenced by what we heard internally and what we could hear today. So safety is at the top of our list. So just an example here. One of the goal statements says, protect all staff, inmates, and clients under community supervision from suffering harm and injury. It's a grandiose goal statement. And then one example is provide more hands-on training courses for existing staff, not just security staff, but existing staff, all staff, in what can be some pretty dangerous situations that they're in. Gives you a little sense of it. Again, you can follow along in the plan. I'll just hit a couple of other ones here. So practice servant leadership. One of the objectives, not listed here, but is like, how do you define what practicing servant leadership is in a corrections setting? So that's one of the objectives that we'd want to accomplish, for example, in this year. I hit a couple of more of these, and then we're going to turn it over to you. Engage community stakeholders is one of our initiatives. And so one of the things that we actually need to do is build a good database of people and have it centrally located, so when opportunities like this come up, we can get a hold of everybody who really wants to hear from us in a timely fashion, as opposed to piecemealing it together. That might become one of the objectives. In terms of providing transformative programming for people who are assigned to the agency, one of the goals that we came up with, again, it's a draft goal, but increase the number, the second one down here, increase the number of people released from prison who within 30 days obtain meaningful employment, enroll in educational programming, or actively engage in community-based treatment by 90%. So that's a draft goal that we put together and share it with you for your consideration. And then, how do we measure where we are today, and then measure where are we in 6 months, a year, 2 years, and 3 years down that path. And in that regard. So that's an example of one of the goals. And we're kind of at that stage where we really want to turn this over to you. And I'm just going to ask for kind of a little bit of feedback from folks here about how you like to do it. I've done a number of town halls over the years, and but we can do it one of two ways, or we can do it both ways. We can pass around some cards, and if you have a bit of feedback that you'd like to share, but for whatever reason you're not comfortable speaking in the meeting, you can write it down and pass them in. I can read them. I'll act as a little bit of a facilitator. Marcus, Michelle, and Curtis can answer questions or address any ideas that you may have that you want us to take in. But we also can just open it up and people can raise their hands and speak. We don't want folks to filibuster, so we want to keep comments so everybody who wants to be heard today can be heard. So do you like kind of just doing the combination, or do you want to do it one way or the other? Anybody have a preference? Combination? Okay. All right, so we'll pass that around. And then we've got a microphone. Sarah's got a microphone here as well. And we'll pass around these. Again, I'll act more as a moderator to try to keep us on time here. So folks who want to just ask questions, offer comments and input, and Sarah will bring around the microphone. Maybe just mention your name and where you're from, and then we'll go from there.
My name is A.G. Hewitt, and I come from the housing and homeless industry.
Okay.
I'm currently retired, but I'm the COC coordinator for the Central Region, and worked with Kathy Denbrook
Oh, great, yeah.
on the Interagency Council. I don't see housing in here anywhere. I know you have plans for housing.
Yeah.
Because when we do a count of the homeless people within the community, there's a large number of those that have a criminal background that can't find housing. So I'm just wondering if you have reached out to the landlords in the area to form some partnerships where they would allow maybe 1 or 2 people within their units that have a criminal background.
So that would fall under the transformative programming.
Yes.
Area, but does Curtis or Michelle, anybody want to kind of talk about just generally on the community housing efforts or Commissioner, I know, has worked on that as well.
So one of the things that the department is doing is we are participating in the Olmsted Plan, and housing came up across, I mean, just across the board, we all know. Doing release planning, talking to those that are incarcerated, all of those kinds of things. So housing actually is on the top of the priority, but outside of this, we're working on with some other agencies, with housing, with DPS, with DHS, and those kinds of things, so.
Surprised not to see it in here. Because without the housing, it's hard to do the education and the training and everything else that we haven't paid.
I think that was a great question. I appreciate you calling that out. We were actually in a meeting last week preparing for an Olmsted sub-cabinet meeting yesterday, and I think there was some consensus in the room in that discussion that we probably need to find a place for something within the strategic plan, specifically calling out housing. So I think that that's very timely. Appreciate the feedback.
All right, other hands up?
Thank you. Well, thanks, first of all, for asking for these meetings to get feedback. I think that's really important. My name is Paula Schaefer. I'm with Safe Harbor, Minnesota Department of Health. And I didn't read this word for word, so forgive me if I missed something, but where are the youth?
Youth. Curtis.
So, I mean, they're not in here. They're mentioned on page 10.
Yep.
And I know Department of Corrections deals with youth, and if they're left out of that, that really frightens me because that's the feeder system into the adult world. Our juveniles come through the juvenile system and into our adult system, and we have no mention of youth. There's one mention of youth of color, but what about needs of boys, girls, gender nonconforming LGBTQ kids, and then all the racial and ethnic aspects of each of those groups of youth. So I'm wondering about where are the youth in this plan?
Curtis, I'll let you take that one.
No, thank you for the question. I really appreciate that question because that's from my former world. And so you're correct. The youth are not mentioned here, but our commitment to the youth for everything that you just noted is a high priority of this, not only this administration, but this agency, which is why we've taken the steps to actually add one of our divisions, which is our juvenile justice reform unit, which is going to be specific to engaging on all of those things that you've talked about, not just talking about the disparities that exist with our youth of color and our American Indian youth, but what are we looking at as far as across the state where there's programming that's not just cultural specific but gender specific. How do we develop some type of central repository so that we actually know exactly where our youth at and the issues exactly that are facing them from not just here in the metro, not just right here in the metro, but also in greater Minnesota as well. On any given day, I can tell you how many of our adult incarcerated people are in our facilities, but unfortunately, I can't do that for you on any given day with our youth, which is one of our most vulnerable populations. So for us, it's imperative that we have the data that is readily available so we can identify not only those youth, but the issues facing them, but really appreciate the question. But just know I would be not doing my job if I made sure that youth fell through the cracks, particularly with all the issues they're dealing with trauma, mental health, and chemical dependency. And you also made a good point at the latter of saying that if we don't address that, everything that we're looking to do as far as transformational change is not going to happen if we don't cut off that feeder system from our youth who then come into contact with the system and then eventually, unfortunately, graduate into the adult system. So thank you for pointing that out, but that is intentionality for us.
Will you put youth in this plan?
Yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Again, comes in under part of that transformative program.
And I just wanted to mention also that we have 4 staff that sit on the governor's children's cabinet, and so we're also working collaboratively through that cabinet and with the other agencies, but I did take some notes here specific to the youth.
And we are also doing Facebook Live, and so we might get some questions from folks who are following along on that.
You have one that might help everybody else in the room as well. Can you address whether the draft plan is available anywhere online currently for remote people?
Oh, good question.
If you can repeat it back for the microphone.
Yes, so probably the best way is if you email us, we will send you a copy in the short term, and you can email us at doc.strategic, STRATEGIC, EGIC.plan, PLAN, .input, INPUT, at state.mn.us. So we can send it back to you before we get it up online if that's quicker. So again, doc.strategic.plan.input at state.mn.us. Good question, and thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, my name is Robert Maho. So I am a volunteer, religious services. I'm Christian. I go in with 2 different ministries. So I'm in Lionel Lake, Stillwater, 3 times a month, and Rush City also for once a year. We've been doing a retreat, a weekend retreat called Residents Encounter Christ, REC, or REC for short. And I've noticed lately in the last few years that this program has been getting cut short to the point now where we're pretty much across the board, all the 3 facilities that our affiliate has been involved in we haven't done it yet, but they're asking us to reduce it down to 2 short days or 1 day. And this is, I also was an inmate, and I served 9 years when I was from age 24 to 33. I've been out 21 years, so that makes me old. And I want to attest that I wasn't mandated for any treatment. How my life changed was because of becoming a Christian. So all the while I was in the Department of Corrections, I studied the Bible, I attended Bible studies, I went to the very first rec that I mentioned, and then I started helping. On the inside, the men are allowed to come back and help us, so that's an opportunity for them to serve. And then after I've been out and I've been eligible, I've been volunteering, going back in and sharing, and this is a powerful way for the men to transform their lives. So I just wanted you guys to know that it's not good for that our program is getting cut. And I know there are reasons that we've been given, but then some of the reasons have been resolved, like staff shortage. I know Lionel Lakes is back up to the regular staff. So that's really all I wanted to say. Just one other thing is that our programming, we're just allowed, as a volunteer, we're only allowed to have contact with the men while we're inside. But when we get out, or when they get out, we're not allowed to have contact with them. That's one of the rules, and I just think that if we were allowed to go, help them when they get out with some sort of transition, that would benefit them as well as.
Okay.
Yeah, then we can keep better track too of how successful our ministry is.
Great. Very well stated. Any reactions? We're taking notes and appreciate the input. Any comments on that from our panel? Okay. Yep. Well, I can tell you that we met with, each facility has chaplains, and we did spend some time with our chaplains to look at the question of faith and spirituality as a part of transformation. So it'll probably be in that section. Facilities, the facilities division, yeah. It's in that regard. Mike, is that right, Michelle? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you for your powerful testimony on that program. So appreciate it. Other comments? Back over here.
Yeah, Jim Verhoy, former education director, MCF Shakopee, Stillwater, Lionel Lakes, Red Wing, made the rounds. Now working for a Vivo community-based organization in the workforce development space. And one of our biggest challenges in the community is often referred to as second chance hiring. And I know, for example, Oregon, what is it called? I was just looking at it. It is the Governor's Reentry Council Business Implementation Team, for example. One of our biggest issues is having been in corrections and seen the amazing adult basic education, higher education, career technical education training that happens in our facilities and has for decades. People get out and they do not have opportunities to get hired. I've been a small business owner. I understand the risk. I understand there are ways to mitigate the risk. But if the strategic plan does not in some way connect with the business community in a transformative way so that employers start hiring folks with backgrounds, justice-involved folks, the recidivism number, that needle will not move. I am absolutely convinced of that. So I'm wondering where in the strategic plan more direct, deep connection and collaboration with employers can happen so the business community can be part of the solution instead of scared to death to hire people with this blunt instrument we call the criminal background check.
Yeah, great. I'll take a stab at it, and then if others want to jump in. So as I did a number of the tours throughout the agency and the community over the past year, I think it was relatively in the same week I was at Stillwater meeting with some of our inmates who were in education programming, and I asked them kind of the question you just asked, and they said, some of them said, like to have access to some of the building and construction trades unions and those skills so that when I get out, I really want to go into carpentry or I want to go into masonry. And then later that week, I was at a meeting with 15 building and construction trades unions in the private sector who were working with contractors who said they would like to partner with the Department of Corrections because they're looking to hire people, including those coming out of prison. And it was one of those kind of aha moments where you've got to establish public-private partnerships where it makes sense and develop those relationships. That is included in the strategic plan to explore developing those relationships, and we've got somebody here that's helping to facilitate that work.
Quick follow-up.
Yep.
We're part of the Southwest Light Rail Transit expansion, building strong communities.
Yep.
Every meeting I went to where the unions were, just about every union said we will not hire somebody with a background. So if you can make some kind of progress collectively with the unions, the trade unions in particular,
Yep.
that will be huge because I know the programming at Faribault, the career technical, and at Stillwater, et cetera, guys are getting trained. Women are getting trained.
Yep.
That was a huge thing because you can get a license. So women are coming out of Shakopee and they're getting jobs. But a lot of the guys can't get hired because the unions won't hire them. So if you can make progress there, that would be.
So it is in the plan to explore that and try to develop better and stronger partnerships. So Michelle, did you want to take a crack at this?
Just really quickly, I also want to acknowledge that we have, MinCorp actually helps us in the facilities with regard to programming and employment, and we have changed the advisory panel and what that looks like, and they are community-based partners, CEOs, and formerly incarcerated individuals on that, and that is actually on the April agenda to talk more about how we can get out there in the community and get with businesses to have them understand and educate them about the individuals we have.
Jim, I just want to echo Josh's comments and just thank you for the pointing that out. There's specifically some language in the plan that talks about deepening those public-private partnerships, both with respect to building and construction trades, but even thinking more broadly about what partnership might mean for the department as we really just try to engage more folks in some of this work. I know the commissioner has been connecting with his counterparts at DEED and higher ed, and talking about how can we really reframe second chance hiring in the state and bring some of those heavy hitters that are leading some of our Fortune 500s to the table and use their platform to celebrate the opportunity that I think Minnesota just woefully misses every day. And I also just don't want to miss the opportunity, because I don't know if it'll come up, but to emphasize the work that we're doing around education. Thank you for your service at the DOC. We have Assistant Commissioner Daniel Karpowitz on our team, and he was brought to the department specifically to enhance the educational opportunities that are available to the folks that we're serving inside our facilities, so that they're leaving eventually when we have this program up and running with a world-class education that they can go out and use to compete for jobs in Minnesota's marketplace. So a lot going on. Really excited about that specific area of the plan, but awesome question.
All right, other questions or comments?
Hi, I'm Kim Coleman with Tasks Unlimited. I'm a placement contractor with vocational rehabilitation. Most of the clients that we work with have mental health and physical health disabilities. So number one, I'm curious about how that will be addressed, and they also have ex-offender background. So I'm not only facing liaising with the employers with individuals with criminal background, but they also have mental health disabilities. So the combination makes it twice as hard, and we're just now in the last 3 years of the new contract getting employers to open up and understand our representation, but they're still not accepting the backgrounds. So that's number one. The second is the inclusion of LGBTQ, specifically transgender, to see how that's going to play out in the plan also.
Okay. Any reactions or comments? We're taking notes. Thank you.
I mean, I would thank you for identifying that as a priority. I think, we all agree and continue to seek opportunities to improve that. I think that we do certainly have work to do, and some of the work within Olmsted, I think, is really informing some of that, but also just the engagement with our inmates and our facility leadership around this conversation is really important as well. So really appreciate the comments.
Hi, I'm Carmen McQuitty with the Justice Involved Women and Girls Task Force here at the DOC. And obviously I know that in the flow chart and SAFIA we have a whole government relations committee, but I'm not seeing anything in terms of legislation and lobbying in the plan, because like what Jim's talking about, a lot of those are legislative fixes to the Fair Credit Reporting Act and DHS disqualification. So what are we doing in terms of strategic planning to actually make legislative change that impacts so much of what we do at DOC? That's
a great question. Anybody want to take a stab at kind of government affairs on that one? I can tell you, we when we put together the plan, we had a lot of conversation about the need to be proactive on legislation, and that the department was making its case to the legislature and to other elected bodies on both, not only on what is needed, the resources, but also if there is any kind of creative changes to the law that promote public safety, as well as lead to the mission of transforming lives. So we are hearing you loud and clear on that front, and again, it might be one of those areas we want to take another look at. So, other questions?
Hi,
Raj.
My name is Raj, and I'm just here representing the community. I'm wondering, when I read through this draft document, is heavily weighted towards enhancing and enforcing the DOC system, right? Modernizing the DOC system. I'm wondering, how do you address the question of abolishing and abandoning the correction system? How do we move in that direction?
Abolishing and abandoning the correction system.
Did you have a question?
Of course, Raj would answer that or ask that question. I'm gonna take some advice and answer the question I wish Raj would have asked, but so I think this notion of change, right? I don't think that the commissioner's directive certainly hasn't been to abolish the department of which he leads. So I'm going to reject the question, but I think certainly this commissioner has really opened the doors. I think today's an example of that, and we've had a lot of engagement with Raj over time, and it looks like he has a thought, and so I want to let you. All right, you're waiting for me. All right, I'm not going to filibuster. But I was a part of the transition process. So I had previously worked for now Governor Walz, and was asked to take leave from my previous employer to help out on the transition, selecting governors for this cabinet. And I was tasked with 3. So I worked closely with the governor-elect at the time, the first lady to be, and then the chief of staff on education, higher education, and corrections. And they were together for a reason. Dissimilar to previous administrations, this one is really focused on the intersection and opportunity around those 3 departments specifically, because I think most people in this room would agree. A lot of folks end up in this system because opportunities aren't presented to them that are presented to others. And it really starts with some of these areas like education and higher education. So what is the potential when you bring Commissioner Schnell, Commissioner Olson, and Commissioner Ricker together with this governor and this lieutenant governor and first lady, and really start to talk about how can we change the system? And we have a year under our belt. So far, I think this strategic plan, what the feedback we've gotten internally is it's ambitious, which, I think every strategic plan should be, but it's really informed by staff and community partners and the folks that we're trying to serve. And so I think as we continue down this path together in year 2, year 3, year 4, it's going to be really important to stay engaged and help us stay on track in terms of how are we making progress to make this system work better for the folks that we're trying to serve, enhancing community safety, but also making sure that we're creating more opportunities internally for the folks that we're tasked with incarcerating and returning, helping reenter into our community so that they can be successful. So specific ideas, broad ideas are all welcome, and this plan is one vehicle to do that. I think the challenge really is with you, my friend, as we continue to go down this path together. What can we do to do better by the folks that we're trying to serve?
Anybody else want to tackle that one?
Thanks for the question there, Raj. No, I appreciate that. I think when we talk about abolishing the criminal justice system, I would say that according to our strategic plan, that would probably fit in one of our lofty goals, because I get what you're saying in the spirit. How do we really get to looking at our quote-unquote institutional response through a complete public health lens, particularly when we look at who the number of both our men and women who fill up not just our facilities, but who we have on community supervision. And knowing that many of them are struggling with issues surrounding chemical dependency, mental health, for many of our youth who fall through the cracks. In the interim, until we can get to that place, I think it's important for us. And when we look at this, because you do make a good point, this is how do we, quote unquote, modernize the current DOC, because this is what we have right now. And as you know, I'm always out front in saying this, that the system works entirely like it was designed to. But I think it's an incumbent upon us who are currently in charge to find ways in which, even within that structure, we can make sure our institutional response is one that's actually going to be looking at needs more so than risk. And how do we bring community partners and our business partners to the table in an intentional way to help us and support us on this journey to make transformative change where we can with the current system that we have, and how do we make it more responsive to people's needs in the control and the capacity that we can control. And so that's what this plan looks to do, is what we have currently right now. What can we do with what we with the cards that were dealt with us to make sure that we're doing right, not just by our staff who were entrusted to go out and be public service, but also those who were entrusted to provide good service for. And so I think this plan speaks to that. Again, this is just a draft, so that's why I think all of the feedback has been great so far, and I would continue to welcome that. But your point is well noted, and I appreciate that. And I also want to back up to the comment you made. Really appreciate, particularly about the legislative agenda. And I think, particularly when you talk about DHS disqualifications, as you know, they process probably over 500,000 applications a year. And I know even in the juvenile world, last year there was legislation that we were going to bring forward specifically to address DHS disqualification, because that is one of the things that we really need to look at. I also think in this plan, a lot of the thought process behind this was how do you put an emphasis on things you can control? And knowing that the legislative process is not entirely in our control, if not at all, and it can sway one way or another. Not to say that our efforts there, and I think the policies that we've even put forward during this short session, whether it's in the supplemental, whether it's the bonding and those type of things, even the policies we put forward were put to support what we currently have in this plan. But just make no mistakes about it, there is intentionality how we move forward with that. But again, I think for this sake. It was trying to figure out the things that we can control and can probably change administratively through policy and not be dependent upon the legislative process was where our focus and emphasis on. But that's not to say that we don't feel that going that route is important, because there are some things that we do have to go that route to change, whether it's current rules, statute, that we are going to have to tackle that process to address. But thank you for the question and for pointing that out for both of you. And thanks, Raj, too, as well. Appreciate that.
One last thing.
No, I appreciate you connecting those, Curtis, because they are, I think, very much connected. And it's unfortunate Safia can't be here to speak specifically about our legislative agenda because she has to be at the Capitol right now. But they're not mutually exclusive. And I think the way that the commissioner has talked, especially more recently, about the need to look at the entire system. And how do we make public policy decisions, and how do we as the department advocate for public policy at the Capitol in ways that really puts people at the center of it, and not necessarily institutions that traditionally are seeking funding, are seeking sort of the same policies. And so I think that what legislation and what that looks like over time. I think it's related to Raj's question, too, about how we make this system work better.
All right, so just we've got folks who are filling out the cards. If you want to pass those in, we can kind of go through it and share some of that. We're going to go into kind of rapid speak mode because there's a lot of people who want to share comments. So we're going to... So what we're going to do is probably just listen more as opposed to try to respond to every single comment, just so everybody who wants to speak gets a chance to do it. In that regard. So, all right.
Hi.
Yeah, let's go in order here, then we'll come back at you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Fairbanks, and I'm a new supportive housing provider for Native Men. We're GRH funded. And I was just curious, I was looking through the plan, it's the first time I saw it, and I'm just curious how you guys are getting the input from the inmates themselves. Because these programs that you're talking about are, I developed my program based on their input and what works for them. So I'm just curious if you guys are doing the same thing.
So the question, the comment, the bit of advice is to make sure in the facilities and in the community to be engaging inmates in the planning process as well as out in the community. And I know our deputy commissioners are working on that. Again, we'll kind of go rapid comments just so we can hear from everybody.
All right, I'm Angela. I'm with the Minnesota Brain Injury Alliance. I wanted to echo the note about folks coming out with disabilities and find out if there's going to be a publicly accessible, more detailed fleshing out of how programming related to chemical and mental health might be enhanced in a way that we might be able to see as members of the public.
Great. Got it. Thank you. And again, if you have cards, Sarah's walking around with the microphone. If you got the cards, Aaron will take those. And
Dwight Hostin.
It's on.
Dwight Hostinson with the Redemption Project. I'm CEO. With regards to the issue of employment that was brought up before, part of what we do is we partner with employers and match them with inmates while they're still incarcerated, so that when they get out, they have a job and that kind of thing. Two things that I wanted to bring up is that what makes it successful is, one, personalizing it. If you go to an employer and say, will you hire felons? They go, no, we have a policy, we have insurance, we have all these issues. If you go to the employer and say, I have John over here who happens to be an inmate, and he, this is what he's done, this is his background, we found that that's very successful in making it, but you have to make it do a one-on-one thing. And that's too partly where the nonprofits can really be helpful in making that happen. And then also the other part of it is that it's an education process on behalf of the employers. I mean, part of our job is educating the employers of the financial benefits it is to hiring people who have been formerly incarcerated.
Great. So. Thank you. Duly noted. All right, we'll keep going on our rapid comment section here. And we're going to try to hit people who haven't spoken, and we can circle back to others.
I'm Barbara Carson from Mankato, And I have two things that I would encourage you to consider. One is putting at least a little bit of more emphasis on community corrections, particularly probation. I don't believe I see the word in the document. And certainly focusing on practices and policies of DOC probation, which I know you've got different delivery systems, but DOC in the past has been a leader at trying to get those other agencies to understand what evidence-based practices are out there and stuff. Similarly, I would encourage you to consider putting something in there about collaborating with other parts of the criminal justice system. DOC could be a leader in trying to deal with racial disparity by working with some of the other agencies that keep sending people to the to be clients in corrections. Thanks.
Great feedback. Thank you. And then our deputy commissioners here will you want to? Yep. Okay.
Mary McCumber, Mayor of Oak Park Heights. This past year, I was president of the Minnesota Mayors Association and hosted the Mayors Conference in my city, and was able to bring a group of mayors to the Stillwater Prison to meet face-to-face with prisoners that were getting close to parole or their releases. And the feedback that came back from that was the mayors were extremely profoundly affected by it and encouraged doing it again. And then with talking with the wardens, it had never been done at any other prison before, and how valuable it was to the prisoners as well. So I would encourage you, if you can do that in any other of the facilities, and it doesn't have to be just mayors, it could be anyone from the communities, how beneficial it would be.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming today.
Josh, while Sarah's on her way up here from online,
Yes.
two comments if you can address. One, you spoke about rewarding good behavior. Can you go into detail about what the plans are for rewarding good behavior? Secondly, some of the plans surrounding improving the internal culture within the agency.
Great. Do any of my colleagues want to take a stab at those two comments, or do you want to think about it a little bit? We'll come back at it in a minute. You want to talk about the culture? Okay, Marcus will, and they kind of are connected.
I'll speak to the latter of the comments. I think the culture within the DOC, especially within some facilities, is it's tough, and I think the data reflects that we're, as many of you know, struggling to staff a number of our facilities, which is having effects on our ability to provide programming. It's having negative effects on our staff, as well as the folks that we're trying to serve. And we came in, a few of us who are not originally from corrections, and just started asking a lot of questions, a lot of dumb questions, but got some pretty profound responses across the board throughout the department, and ended up engaging probably about 1,000 members of our staff through that engagement. And a couple things that we really honed in on. One is just how issues around staff misconduct are handled. Traditionally, here you would have a supervisor investigate his or her or their staff, depending on what the conduct was, would erode the relationship between those individuals. Sometimes it would take weeks to months for them to figure it out, and so we're doing those investigations much differently with a lot more due process, much more confidentiality. We're also overhauling our performance management system. The plan talks about servant leadership, which is a principal approach that the governor takes, and something that both Josh and I have had a lot of exposure to previously, and something that we think would really work well within the Department of Corrections. And we're trying to shape a performance management system that really reflects a lot of those principles, providing more support to supervisors, helping folks de-escalate situations, and just really putting people first. In the department. If you've worked here, or if you work here, this place is driven by policies, which I think tend to dehumanize the work and the environment. We're really trying to flip that around and put folks first. And some of what that looks like. So there's a lot underway. I think just the work that we're doing around leadership and really identifying a leadership philosophy for this agency and investing in that over time. I hope we'll have, I think we hope we'll have lasting effects. And so I think at the end of the day, really engaging people at all levels, regardless of where they work or where they might be residing, I think is sort of the first step in doing a lot of listening and trying to reshape that culture so it's one that's much more supportive for everybody.
All right. So if you're following online, there, look at the section in the plan on servant leadership. It really gets at some of the culture questions.
I'm Chris Day, Director of Reentry Services for VOA, and I'm going to piggytail off of a couple of comments ago about specifically community corrections involvement in helping shape this document and their input and their continued input, if they were involved, will they be continued, specifically around release violations. And I saw a term I just hadn't seen before, technical readmissions, but I'm assuming they're one and the same. As we know in community, one of the biggest barriers that an individual can face is their conditions of release. Is that a conversation that's happening within this document about conditions of release, reform, or improvement moving forward?
Curtis, you want to take a quick stab at that, and then we'll go around.
Appreciate the question, particularly as we talk about community corrections. I'm always of the belief that those closest to the problem are always closest to the solutions. Our whether it's our CCA partners or CPO partners, are vital and critical to this work moving forward. As we talk about technical violations, not just in the adult world, but we see this a lot with our juvenile too, the amount of people who we find in our facilities, both in our adult facilities and our juvenile facilities for technical violations. There has been internal talk about how do we condense those conditions that are placed out there. Because as you know, for those conditions, not all the time, but a good portion of the time, many of them are just a way for those folks necessarily to adhere to supervision. But how do you construct those conditions in a way that are more susceptible to how do we provide supportive services in a sense? And so a lot of times when we're looking at those conditions, we can tell you everything that you're doing wrong, but how do we find ways in which we can point out the things that you're doing right? And how do you construct an actual release plan and a strategic plan while they're on probation that's actually one that's going to meet their needs and not so driven by what do we view as their risk factors. And that's why we've looked at ways in which that we can change policy as it results to technical violations. And that's not to completely take that off the table, but to make sure that if we are looking at a revocation or something solely for just a technical violation, to make sure that there's been a lot of thought process and the impact in this, the potential collateral consequences. What does this mean for a person, for housing, for employment, and those type of things when they are revoked? Because we know that those are significant issues that some people can't come back from. So thank you for the questions, and just so you know that that is of the importance for us, just because of the high number of people that we see actually currently under corrections hold for simply technical violations. So that is something we have to look at and look to address. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Curtis. One of the cards says, why wasn't the plan released before the meeting? We did send it out last week to folks. We don't have a good comprehensive list of stakeholders. That's why the plan is actually calling for it. But we are going to do this again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock right back here in this room. So if you reflect on the plan, you want to come back tomorrow and have more dialogue, you are certainly welcome to do so. And you can also, or send us an email to the email address that is in the memo. But I take responsibility if you didn't get it before the meeting. I'm sorry about that. All right, other comments? Okay, yes.
I just have a suggestion. In looking at your objectives and your goals and your action plan,
Yeah.
I might suggest that you add a section for your community partners.
Oh, okay.
Which would then eliminate a lot of the discussion you're having about mental health, about housing, about LGBTQ, about the youth, about alcohol abuse, about chemical dependency. That would then show them that these are the steps that you plan on taking for those community partners. Otherwise, I think you're going to continue to get, because we're very interested and very vested in this, that way it would eliminate a lot of those questions.
Oh, that's great.
Just a suggestion.
No, that's great. That's why we're here. Thank you. Oh, we've got one over here too. We got about 10 people left on the sheet. We got about 25 minutes left, so we'll go fast here. And we'll get over there.
They're on the list.
Yep.
First of all, Gina Evans with Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge and Second Chance Coalition. First of all, I just want to thank you guys. I've been in and out of corrections for 25 or I guess it's been 35, oh wow, a long time anyways. And this is the first time in all of that time that I've had any hope that things are going to change, and so thank you guys for that, and the commissioner, and so I guess the thing that I just would like to say and to ask you guys is like, how can we help as community partners? Like, what can we do to help you make this happen as far as like programming goes or community engagement? Curtis and I talked about it a little bit this afternoon, but like as far as that culture change goes, for the correctional officers to see that people do get out and stay out, like how can we as impacted people that have changed come in and show the officers that people do get out and stay out and be able to change that culture? Like, how can we help you change that culture? Like, please reach out to us. Can we be on panels? Can we be part of something on the inside? Tanya and I want to come in and be part of a advisory council or whatever, but Marlon, there's a bunch of us that like we want to help you, and so let us help you.
Thank you for the offer. Real quick. Okay, real fast. And Michelle, if you have anything.
Thank you. As you know, we go back a little ways. I would just say, I just first and foremost appreciate you asking how you can help, and I would just say, just doing everything that everyone's doing now. Be a part of the process. Not for the sake of being at the table, but also in a sense to hold us accountable to what we've laid out here and to what is our goal and our mission. But to know that we're looking to walk on this journey with you all. There's so many times that we have our own blind spots with as much as we think that we know. There's a lot going on out in the community that sometimes we aren't even aware of ourselves. So take advantage of this space and administration who is trying to be as transparent as possible, and to have you all at the table to come with as many ideas as you have. I tell people all the time since I've been going around talking, now is the opportunity. Anything that you've thought of that's outside of the box that you feel is ultimately going to make us more efficient and more effective, please bring those to us, and just continue to be a willing partner at the table to go along this journey with us. Because as we talk about the culture, I know sometimes it's spoke about in a negative fashion, but at the same time, everything that we're looking to do, whether it's from a legislative standpoint, from a policy standpoint, unless we continue to get the buy-in for those who are going to be in charge with carrying out these things, what we're looking to do is not going to be successful or sustainable. So just continue to be a willing partner at the table and support us, and we'll continue to support you all in every way that we can. So thank you.
So, Gina, I just want to recognize all the hard work that you've done and the accomplishments that you've made, and I appreciate you being here and asking that question as well. One of the things is that we are looking at how we can do things differently with regard to that peer support or community partners and how we can get those opportunities. So, as Marcus said, a lot of what we do revolves around the policies that we create, and so it's looking at those policies and how we can have them be more effective and put us in a place that we can utilize, your assistance and anyone else that wants to be a part of that. So appreciate you asking.
Just because I think it's a really important question, and echo, what Curtis and Michelle both had to share. I think it really comes down to, continuing to hold us accountable. Right. I mean, for the commitments that we're making, and both in terms of the strategic plan, but also in meetings like this, but also helping us celebrate some success. I've learned in the last year a lot of stuff that's not going well. tends to get communicated, which is really important, and we need to address it and continue to improve. But where things are going well, especially in a culture where folks tend to feel undervalued, and it's just tough work, and we're trying to improve the conditions and be responsive, helping us identify areas where things have improved and are going well, so that we can make sure that whether it's an individual, it's a facility, folks that are trying to do the right thing, that we can make sure that we're sending some praise their way too. And then the second piece is just helping us build relationships. I think that that's a really key component of all this. And in relationships, it's critical to build some trust. It's necessary to be honest. But that whole exercise of relationship building and the authenticity that comes along with it, I think, is really crucial.
All right.
My name is Marlon Mazaris. I'm a formerly incarcerated person. I've been out for a little while now. I was blessed with the opportunity to participate in the CRP program, and so I was released from prison 50 months early. I didn't take that blessing lightly. I promised my guys when I was leaving the facility that I would be a path paver and not a stumbling block maker for them. And so that's my mission every day, is to continue to make paths smoother for guys coming behind me. Also today, I'm also the reentry coordinator at Freedom Works Reentry and Aftercare community in North Minneapolis. And in my position, one of the biggest barriers I have is guys send me applications, and specifically from CIP. They get all approved to come to the program. It's a great facility. I wouldn't endorse it if it wasn't. Right at the last minute, their agents shut them down because they got to go back to where their historical ties are from. And I can tell you, as a person being in long-term recovery that's developed many release plans and relapse prevention plans of my own over the years, some of the things that I need to stay away from are places where I have historical ties, the people, places, and things that cause me to trip up. And so when you send somebody back to where they have historical ties, well, that's where all them things are at. And so the best outcomes we have that I've seen so far, I've been in my position since October, are the people that are allowed to come there that aren't from there because they don't have them things in the neighborhood to trip them up, right? It's the guys that come there that are from the neighborhood that usually, well, they just don't come back at night because they got someplace else to go, and so that policy has been frustrating just in the little bit of time that I've been in this position, and I really think that it's something that needs to be rethought. So, thank you.
Thank you. While Sarah's bringing the microphone over, I just wanted to publicly acknowledge the 100 staff members of the DOC who served on 9 different work groups that developed a lot of the content in here. And also, we met again with over 1,000 employees of the DOC at 60 visits across all the facilities and the field services to gather input, to really get a sense of the state of the agency over the last year. And I want to just publicly thank them for sharing with us things that were hard to hear at times, but was really important. And we're at this stage right now, we're engaging community partners, but I know that we'll be heading back out to meet with our own employees in the department, and we can share some of your offers to partner and to work with us with them when we do that in the coming weeks. So here we are.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Brad Janowski, the Executive Director with the Construction Career Training Program. It's a reentry program for getting people into the construction trades, and we have good success with that. But the things that do trip us up are the things that are just built into the system.
Yeah.
And I would love to see the Commissioner's Office, along with the Governor's Office, use some weight and leverage to go to other agencies, such as DHS, Department of Public Safety, and deal with these collateral consequences that create so much trouble post-incarceration, such as driver's license suspensions, child support that hasn't been dealt with during the last 5 years of incarceration. So folks coming out of the system are coming out with a 1-year suspension of a driver's license, which creates barriers, and $40, $50, $60, $80, $100,000 of 10 years of backed up child support. Yes, there's systems in place, but they don't happen. Nothing happens. So I would love to see, again, I'd love to see the weight of these 2 offices step up to some of these other agencies that are having a collateral impact. So.
Right. Thank you for the advice. Thank you.
Hi, Tammy Jo Lieberg. I'm the Community Corrections Director for Candy Ojai County.
Great.
And I just want to reiterate again what we've heard a couple other people talk about is, part of this, as you said, reducing the number of technical readmissions to prison by 70% overall. And just kind of that reminder of the fact that the prevention of that, the supervision of that, all of those things are really dependent on community corrections.
Yep.
And we really need funding and the partnership for probation to get through that.
Thank you.
Hey, David Benke, speaking for myself at this point. Really excited to see the stuff about improvement in wellness and satisfaction and engaging staff in decision making. That seems really important, and also engaging staff organizations like unions. A little disturbed that there doesn't seem to be same metrics for people in prison on each of those things. And also having metrics where prisoners can say how their conditions are, because pretty uniformly right now I hear that the conditions are worse than they've been at least a decade in the DOC for prisoners. So that's really worrisome to not have metrics that we can use to actually see how conditions are improving, or if they are. And also to acknowledge and be in partnership with prisoner organizations so that they can express what they need. Also, just question of accountability also doesn't seem to be strongly there for employees. And I know we're in a situation right now where 2 guards who were accomplices in a sexual assault at Shakopee are returned to the same unit in the same facility as we speak. And so I know they were fired by the DOC, so thank you for doing that, but they're now back in the same place despite that. So I hope people are asking, well, what went wrong? Like, how can people, support sexual assault and still be in a facility with the same people? That's really disturbing. And then also excited about the technical violations piece and the reduction. That'd be like an 800-person reduction or so. And wondering, well, 2 things with that. One, it seems like reductions can meet some of your other goals that you might not have to do if you succeed in doing that. So, for example, rehabilitating, replacing units in St. Cloud and Stillwater, if we reduce the population by enough, we might just can abandon those. We might not need to put more money into things that we're not going to be using. And then also, as most people know, the incarceration rate in Minnesota has gone up 400% in the last number of decades. So, I would love to see something in this plan that's on there about getting ourselves back to an incarceration rate that's much better for our communities and much better for our taxpayers, much better for us. So having some kind of goal about population, I think, would also be something that should really be in this plan.
Okay, thanks, David. Appreciate the input. We'll keep going. I know there's a lot of folks who still wanted to speak, and we've got about 15 minutes left to be respectful of everyone's time.
Okay, my name is Nafissa Ali. I'm a student at the U, and I just want to piggyback on what someone talked about post-incarceration. I feel that we need to talk more about the housing because, getting a job for someone who is a former inmate is hard enough, but getting a house too, and it kind of leads them to homelessness. And I want to know, what exactly is the DOC going to do about it?
Great. So another person advocating to really be more explicit on housing post-release. Excellent. Thank you.
Gary Kriesel, Washington County Commissioner, and thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks for being here, Commissioner.
I'm here for 2 reasons. One is Officer Gom, the other one is Officer Parisi, who gave their lives in the line of duty. And looking at the promote wellness, I would like to see maybe some stronger language about families.
Excellent.
You have developed trauma-informed responses to an employee involved in a critical incident. In the unfortunate tragic event when they lose their lives, I mean they're going to want to have their families have support, and I hope it's expedited support that throughout the whole process of grieving and getting them back on their feet, and that there's a commitment to follow up on that. I'm sure there is, but I just think it'd be good to have some of that language in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for your voice.
Finally, my name is Marcel Garrettson. I got 20 years in the state facilities and 25 years of working outside the facilities. And Curtis said it, that supportive services for people to get when they come out, whether they're on probation or on parole or exiting out. They need the elders in the community to support them and reintegrate them back into the families and communities, I believe, is most of the answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dora Sotilin. I work at the Family Partnership with the Pride program. I'm the male and LGBTQ advocate for those that are sexually exploited or trafficked. So I was running groups in the JDC for a little bit, and there's a lot of things there where, like, I even asked someone who's in charge of passing meds, if someone comes in that's transgender and they're working through getting their hormones, does that continue, and they didn't even know. So it's small things like that, and this is so much more than just opening beds for those that are transgender or gender nonconforming. It's actually implementing training, like mandatory training for staff. That was actually something I was invited to do at the Shakopee Women's Prison. When the warden switched around, there was no follow through with that. So really just, letting those that are transgender choose which CO does a pat down, what their preferred or what their pronouns are, their names, and then really being able to make any sort of reports without retaliation. So if that's not being respected, things like that. So a big thing on accountability that way.
Thank you. Michelle.
I appreciate your comments and your question, and I know there's a couple people in this room that have the exact same comments and questions that you do. And I will readily tell you that for the last year, we have been working to change our policies regarding transgender individuals. At the end of February, we are in February, we just opened up the training for staff, and so I actually haven't even taken it yet because I just got back from vacation, but I will. And we have been working with our external partners with our policy to make some changes, and have gotten some very good feedback. So I'm looking forward to those changes in all of the things that you mentioned. So thank you.
Great. We got about 10 minutes left.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Habel. I'm the sheriff in Renville County. You've heard the word earlier today, and I would just reiterate that word collaboration, and especially with the other partners that are involved in corrections, namely sheriffs and jails across the state. Today, our frustration is there's such little communication between what's going on at the DOC and the prison facilities and what's happening in the jails. I know that we each have programs and specific programming for different inmates, but really we're guessing at what each other is actually up to. So that collaboration is extremely important. Let's face it, we deal with exactly the same inmates. They spend up to the first year of their incarceration with us. We ship them off to you. You have no idea what we have done with that inmate. We bring them to you, and they're with you for a time. At some point, they're released back into the community. In our county, we have a DOC probation agreement, and if they violate their parole, they come back to us. We have no idea what's happened to them during their prison experience, and so we can't, and in fact, the probation officers have really very little idea of what we're doing inside the jails. And so that collaboration, that communication is paramount. I don't see an awful lot of that in the strategic plan, but I think I would speak for most of the sheriffs in the state.
Thank you, Sheriff. It is one of our top 9 initiatives that's engage community stakeholders. And we have a little bit of work to do to fill out some of the details, but the spirit that the governor and the commissioner have communicated very clearly to this department is we need to open the doors of collaboration in that regard. So the fact that you came here from Renville County and just shared your thoughts today means the world to us, so thank you so much. But yes, it is in there.
Hi, my name is Elliot Butai. I'm the Criminal Justice Coordinator at NAMI, Minnesota, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And thank you for having these kinds of meetings and engaging the community. And I echo all the things that were said about mental health. And it would be nice to see maybe more concrete plans of what it looks like to connect people with mental illnesses to services in the community when they leave, as well as in the prisons, and maybe training for staff just to have some baseline knowledge about mental illnesses and what they, I mean, just what that looks like and how to understand that. And then also I appreciated Raj's comment, and I know that it's maybe a lofty thing, but maybe something ideological to offer about that. It would be nice maybe to see the word accountability in here, but more of a culture shift of what corrections means, and that does it mean just taking bad people away from the community, and can we have a shift of understanding that people don't cause harm in a vacuum and they don't return to a vacuum, and that it just seems like there's so many things that have been said that could be bolstered by the understanding that these are specific people that have caused harm to specific people, and they caused harm probably because they had specific needs from a specific community, and just that understanding that it just seems, maybe we could shift from the structure, you know, that we just can kind of keep those things separated, but that we actually have to keep those things really integrated.
Thank you. A few more comments here.
Yeah, hello. Hello. Yeah, my name's Daryl Morrison, and I just represent the people that are locked up that have maybe in a situation that I've been in. I spent 23 years incarcerated, not in Minnesota, but in California, in maximum security prison. And I don't say that to be a tough guy. It's the environment. So I focus in on whatever you're doing, the environment in there plays a big part in the recidivism, in the mindset, in the mental health, and everything. The other part is like the gentleman said here, and so many people hit on, I'm living this. My reality is I'm a pariah in society with a record. Everywhere I go, Uber, everywhere. I can't get a job. I get my living. I live with, my name is on the lease because of my wife. So, you know, I got to rent a room. I don't have the income. You know, there's a lot of different stuff going on. The other part is the psychological effects of incarceration. That environment, there's a professor, Craig Haney, who wrote a paper about the psychological complications of post-incarceration. And this is what I suffer from. I'm living it. For the people that did time and got out and were able to assimilate, this is the problem with these people, a lot of people, is not knowing how to assimilate it, not knowing how to, feeling like I can't assimilate. So that environment in there is important, and after when they get out, what am I going to do? Going to another place is good. I'm here in Minnesota, I'm doing much better. So it's got to be looked at for real. You know, I'm living it. You guys are saying, just one last thing, you guys are saying it. Every time I hear it, it's a chill in me when you tell me about reforming backgrounds and everything. I'm living it. What do I do to take care of myself today? My greatest part of my anxiety comes when I have a meltdown, is when I see that I can't take care of myself.
Thank you for being here today.
Hi, my name is Courtney Spots, and I am a caseworker at a housing facility with services in St. Cloud. I case manage over 70 male offenders 18 and older, primarily within the Department of Corrections, those that have treatment mandates as soon as they get out. We also work with those that have serious and persistent mental illness, the trifecta. What I struggle with day to day as their caseworker is individuals getting released from the Department of Corrections without active health care. We talked about in one of the goals, within 30 days, getting them into a community-based treatment. That's awesome. I need those to get a Rule 25 within a couple days. Their gap of a relapse is that short. And we talk about, I have gentlemen that get released with 7 days worth of medications, if they're lucky. Yeah, we get a script, they're gonna spend their J-Pay money on a new pair of sneakers. They're not spending it at the pharmacy. So what I would love to see is an implication.
And we'll go through them as a part of our, as we update the strategy. So I think we've got time for maybe one last question. Some of us can hang around afterwards, but we want to be respectful of everyone's time. today, so
Dwight Tostenson again with Redemption Project. Would really want to say thank you to you guys for pulling this together and gaining feedback from providers. But one of the things I would suggest or encourage you to do is take this to the level where you actually identify who's responsible for these changes, because just having a bunch of goals on a piece of paper isn't going to get us anything. If we have to know, at the lowest level, who's responsible, who's going to be held accountable.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. There was one hand over here. Has anybody who hasn't spoken yet have a final comment? All right. You get the final word.
I just also want to include one more thing. I kind of want to ask about the Department of Corrections relationship between organizations such as Countering Violence Extremism, which targets Muslim Americans, especially the Somali community in Minneapolis. And I feel like not talking about it really institutionalizes and normalizes the injustice of how against the Somali community and how members of my community end up in these facilities and other worse places. So I guess I want to know.
Thank you. All right. Well, are there any final comments based upon the cards from our panel here?
Well, I guess I would just say for final comments, first and foremost, thank you for that question. Just know that both internally and both externally too as well, in our collaboration with the AG's office has been specifically about what you're talking about. So just know that is on a priority of not just the administration, but of this agency too as well. So thank you for that. I guess I just want to say, because a couple of the cards I have, those questions have been talked about, but I know I'll also look to provide some feedback for these cards as well. I just want to say to y'all, just thank you. Just thank you. Back in the corner, you talked about the agencies. I hear you. I appreciate the comment. To the sheriff who drove down, the commissioner, and just all of you, I can't just stress enough how thankful I am just for the comments that you all made and just being candid in your observations. We talk about that accountability piece, and for us, just having these candid conversations and the input from you all is going to help us to ultimately reach the goals that we're looking to do, and to make sure that we're living up to the values that we put out here for you all to listen to and, again, to hold us accountable to. Particularly in a day and age where the messaging, particularly when we talk about whether it's criminal justice reform, whether it's transformative programming, the narrative can change so much. So I can, again, tell you how I'm appreciative of all of you who have an understanding for our incarcerated men and women and the challenges that they face. But at its core level is the humanity and the compassion that all of you exhibit for those who at times don't have a voice and become the voiceless. So I just appreciate you all for continuing to lend a voice to those who have been affected by our criminal justice system or who have came into the system and paid their debt and just looking to reintegrate back into the community in a productive fashion. So again, thank you all for all the work that you all do, and please continue to support the work that we're doing and find ways in which that we can also better support you all in your efforts that you're doing. Thank you.
Just a final couple housekeeping items. Again, tomorrow night, Wednesday, February 26th, 6 o'clock, back in this room, we'll do it again. And if you have any specific comments that you want to send in, the email address, doc.strategic.plan.input@state.mn.us. And to those who followed along on Facebook Live, thank you for participating. Thanks, everybody.